I'm Marion Thorpe, 75 years old, and sitting on the edge of a borrowed bed in a house that's no longer mine. My ribs are still sore from the fall, but it's not the bruises that ache most. It's the quiet. It's the way my own son stood at the top of the stairs and let me go. I can still hear his voice rising like a slap across the room. "This is none of your business." That's when I stopped being his mother in his eyes and became something else, someone inconvenient, before I go any further. Let me know where you're listening from in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button. If you've ever had to choose between family and self-respect, I was born in Tennessee but spent most of my life in a quiet Midwestern town called Norfield. Moved there when my son Garrett was 3. We'd lost my husband in a highway crash, the kind that makes the front page for a day and then disappears. I still remember standing in the kitchen with the phone pressed to my cheek as the officer spoke like he was reading from a script overnight. I became a single mother with a toddler and no plan. We were renting a little place, then 2 bedrooms in a yard with a white fence. Garrett used to press his face to the window, waiting for his daddy to pull in after work after the funeral. We had to move into a small upstairs apartment in a neighborhood where folks didn't stop to chat at the mailbox. The whole place smelled faintly of damp carpet and burnt coffee. But the rent was low and the supermarket was 2 blocks away. I took a job at that store running a register Monday through Saturday. Manager let me work school hours so I could walk Garrett home at 3. Most nights, I'd feed him leftovers and then go back to clean up the deli counter when Mrs. Hanson, our neighbor, could watch him. Those were tight years. We didn't have much, but I saved what I could every week. I tucked $5 into a coffee tin behind the rice canister on the top shelf college fund. I used to call it, though. I knew it might never be enough. Garrett wasn't the best behaved kid in class, but he was sharp. Asked good questions, loved puzzles. Math came easy to him. I thought maybe he'd be the first in our family to wear a cap and gown. But when he turned 18, he told me he wanted to be a trucker. Said he didn't want to sit behind a desk. Said the road made more sense to him than a classroom. I didn't fight it. He signed up for long-haul runs with a logistics company, and within a year, he had his own beat-up pickup truck and a little apartment across town. We kept our Sunday lunches for a while. He'd come over with stories from the road, little souvenirs, fridge magnets from Idaho, keychains shaped like Texas. I lined them up on my bookshelf like medals one Sunday. He brought a girl with him, Vanessa Bright, Smile, waitress from Ohio. 10 years younger than Garrett, she called me Mom that first week and offered to help fold laundry. 6 months later, they got married at the county office. No flowers, no reception, just a quick ceremony and dinner at a steakhouse, where the waitress brought us all slices of chocolate cake on the house soon after. They bought a house on Ashland Avenue, a single-story ranch with a red door and a little patch of green out front. Garrett showed me around like it was a museum. "See, Mom, this is all because of you," he said. And I wanted to believe him, but the visits got fewer. Vanessa stopped calling me Mom and started calling me Marion. In a tone that always felt like the start of a dismissal, Garrett didn't seem to notice or didn't want to. Or maybe that's just something sons do when they're trying to keep peace between their wife and their mother. By the time I retired from the store after 30 years, they gave me a sheet cake and a $25 gift card. The pension was barely enough to cover rent, groceries, heat all rising faster than my bank account. I called Garrett not to ask, but to tell him the truth. I couldn't afford to live alone anymore, he said. "Of course, Mom, we'll figure it out a week later." He pulled up in the pickup truck and helped me carry what little I had left into their home. Vanessa smiled at the door, said it was just temporary, said they were happy to have me. The room they gave me had once been meant for a nursery. I told myself I wouldn't stay long, but part of me knew better. Vanessa started bringing it up during dinner. First, it was a passing comment about the cost of groceries. Then it was the electric bill. One evening, she folded her napkin slowly, looked across the table and said, "Marion, we're one family, aren't we? It's only fair everyone contributes." Garrett didn't say much at first, just shifted in his seat and gave me a half smile. "She's right, Mom. You've always done your part." I didn't argue. I nodded and told them I understood. It felt like the right thing to do, considering they'd taken me in. We settled on a third of my pension. Vanessa suggested I withdraw the cash at the start of each month and give it directly to her. "It's easier," she said. "That way I can take care of the household budget." I handed her the money in an envelope, no questions asked. The first time I heard her raise her voice, she was standing in the hallway. I'd been folding laundry while she was out, just trying to be useful. She picked up one of her sweaters and held it like it was something she didn't recognize. "Please don't touch my things, Marion. I like them folded a certain way." Her voice was flat. I apologized, of course. That's all I seemed to be doing, apologizing for taking up space, for trying too hard. She started criticizing my cooking. One night, I made stew, something Garrett had always liked. Vanessa took one bite and pushed the bowl aside. "Too salty," she said, standing up to grab her purse. "I'll just order something." She looked at Garrett as she spoke, not at me. When the pizza arrived, she called out loud enough for me to hear, "At least this is edible." I stopped cooking after that. Just made oatmeal or soup for myself when they weren't home. I washed my own dishes and did only my own laundry. My days narrowed to the size of the guest room. It had once been painted yellow, maybe in preparation for a nursery. Now it was just beige and quiet. Every month, Vanessa asked for more. The water bill went up, she'd say. Or, we had to replace the plumbing in the guest bathroom. Her reasons always changed, but the message stayed the same. I owed more. I stopped asking questions. When I did, she'd tilt her head and speak slowly like I was hard of hearing. "We gave you a place to live, Marion. Surely that's worth a little help." There was a savings account I hadn't told them about. Not much, just the small fund I'd started years ago for Garrett's education. I never closed it, never touched it. After he chose trucking, I kept it going out of habit. It helped to know I had something of my own. Something I hadn't handed over in a white envelope at the start of the month. When Garrett came home from his runs, he was always tired. He'd throw his bag by the door, kiss Vanessa, and disappear into the bedroom. Sometimes they'd go away for the weekend. Other times they stayed in curtains-drawn music playing softly. When he did speak to me, it was brief. "Hi, Mom. Everything good?" If I said yes, he smiled. If I said no, he'd sigh and say, "Vanessa's doing her best, you know. Don't make it hard." The laptop was old, a second-hand thing I'd bought before moving in. It worked well enough for reading books, watching the news, writing emails. One evening, the screen stayed black. I unplugged it, checked the cord, tapped the power button again and again. Nothing. The next morning, I waited until the house was quiet. Garrett was on the road. Vanessa usually slept in. I knocked gently on her door around 11. She opened it halfway, bathrobe tied at the waist. I asked if I could use part of my monthly contribution to replace the laptop. "Nothing fancy," I said. "Just enough to read and check the weather." She leaned against the doorframe and shook her head. "Not a good time, Marion. Garrett's insurance is due. The house payment just went through. Maybe in a few months." I tried to explain that it was my money, that I wasn't asking for a gift. "We've talked about this," she interrupted. "You give what you can, and I take care of the expenses." Then she shut the door. 2 days later, I was sorting the mail on the hallway table. A glossy envelope from Midas Jewelry caught my eye. Inside was a receipt for a diamond pendant earrings to match. I recognized the date. She'd made the purchase the morning after our conversation about the laptop. I slipped the receipt back into the envelope and put it right where I found it. I didn't mention it to Garrett. He'd only defend her. That's what he did. I knew that now. That week, while the rain tapped on the windows, I sat on the porch with a blanket over my knees. The neighbor across the way, a woman I'd seen trimming her roses, waved and came closer. "I'm Edith," she said. "Garrett's mother." "Right, I thought I'd introduce myself sooner. But I don't see you out much." We had tea in her kitchen the next day. She'd baked lemon tart and wore a red cardigan that matched the checkered curtains behind her. Edith was a widow. Her son Rory ran an electronics repair shop in the next town over. Her daughter lived in Oregon. They called. They visited. They sent photos of the grandkids. Your daughter-in-law, Edith, said pouring more tea, she leaves a lot. Late at night, back in the mornings. Always alone. I said I didn't keep track. Maybe it's none of my business, she said, but something doesn't sit right. That afternoon, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Someone had noticed. Someone saw me. I wasn't invisible. When Garrett got back from his run, he walked in like everything was fine. Vanessa had candles-lit dinner on the table, steak and mashed potatoes. I sat across from them listening. Vanessa laughed and reached for her pendant. Remember you said you were looking for an anniversary gift? She said, turning it in the light. I found something perfect. Garrett frowned slightly. Isn't it expensive? She smiled. Don't worry. We had a little extra cushion this month, thanks to your mom. I didn't eat much that night. The next morning, while the house was quiet, I opened the drawer where Vanessa kept paperwork. Beneath a stack of magazines, I found a box with bank statements, her name on multiple accounts, transfers from Garrett's paycheck. The numbers matched the money I'd been handing her in cash. Some amounts were even larger. A few documents had Garrett's name on them too, but the handwriting didn't look like his. I took photos with my old phone. They weren't clear, but enough to show someone who knew what to look for. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew I couldn't stay quiet. I didn't sleep much the night I found the bank statements. The house was quiet, but my mind wouldn't settle. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, going over each page I'd photographed. The numbers, the names, the slow, steady siphoning of money from Garrett's account into hers. I wasn't sure what it all meant yet, not fully, but something in me shifted. Not anger, just a kind of quiet clarity. The next morning, Garrett was outside trimming the hedges. It was warm, unusually so, for that time of year. I brought him a glass of lemonade and waited for him to look up. Thanks, Mom, he said, wiping his brow. For a moment, it felt like old times, just a mother and son on a summer morning. I sat beside him on the porch and tried to speak evenly. I saw something strange in the papers, I said. Some large withdrawals. Garrett, do you know about all the money being moved from your account? He looked at me, blinking. What are you talking about? I hesitated. Bank statements. I didn't mean to pry. I was putting things away and came across them. His expression changed almost instantly. You were snooping? No, I said quietly. I was worried. You had no right, he said, setting the glass down hard on the step. Vanessa's in charge of all that. I trust her. She has accounts in her name. Big transfers. Garrett, He stood up before I could finish. You don't get to accuse my wife. You're making this into something it's not. I'm not accusing anyone, I said. I'm asking you to look at it. His voice rose. Ever since you moved in, it's been one thing after another. You can't handle the fact that I have a wife, that I have a life. I stood too unsure what else to say. You need to stop, he said. Stop trying to stir things up. I just want you to be careful, I said. That's all. He didn't answer, just walked inside, shaking his head. I followed him through the front door, still holding the empty glass. He turned to face me at the foot of the stairs. You don't trust her. You never did. That's not true, I said. You want me to believe she's lying, that she's stealing. I tried to reach for his arm. Please, Garrett, listen to me. He pulled away sharp and fast. This is none of your business. That's when it happened. My foot slid off the top step. I don't know if he pulled or if I lost balance. There was no time to think. My body went sideways down hard, bouncing against the edge of each step. The last thing I remember was the sound of his voice calling my name. When I opened my eyes, I was on the floor. My hip throbbed. My arm wouldn't move right. Garrett was crouched beside me, pale and shaking. Vanessa was in the doorway watching. "What happened?" she asked. "She fell," Garrett said. "We had an argument. Vanessa stepped closer and crouched beside him. "I told you this was coming," she said. "Her memory's slipping. She's been confused for months." I tried to speak, but she cut me off gently. "Marion, you need rest." "You're not well." "She's fine," I said. "I'm fine." Vanessa shook her head. "You've been forgetting things. You're not safe here anymore." She helped me up, or maybe just steadied me, and walked me back to my room. Garrett stayed behind, silent. An hour later, she came in with a folded towel and a tight smile. "You have 2 hours," she said. "Then a cab will take you wherever you want to go." "But you can't stay here." I didn't argue. I packed what little I had clothes, a few photos, the envelope with my documents. Garrett came in once while I was folding sweaters. He looked at the floor, not at me. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. "It's just a lot right now." He carried my suitcase to the curb and helped me into the car. Then he turned and walked away without looking back. I gave the driver an address. Edith's house. She was in the front yard when we pulled up, watering the flowers. When she saw me, her mouth fell open. She dropped the hose and hurried over. "What happened?" she asked. I didn't have the words. Not then. She took my suitcase, guided me through the gate, and brought me into her kitchen. Sat me down. Made tea. That night, I stayed in the guest room, surrounded by wallpaper printed with tiny blue roses. I listened to the quiet hum of her old refrigerator, the creak of her floorboards, the wind outside the window. My ribs hurt. My wrist was swollen, but none of it compared to the hollow ache just beneath my collarbone. Over the next week, Edith didn't push. She brought soup and warm towels. She checked on me, sat with me when I couldn't sleep. When I cried, she didn't ask me to stop. By the 8th day, I came to breakfast. She smiled and slid a mug of coffee across the table like nothing was unusual. I took a sip and looked around her sunny kitchen, geraniums on the windowsill, clean plates stacked neatly by the sink. "You're safe here," she said. "Stay as long as you want." I nodded, grateful. She paused, then said, "Have you thought about what to do?" "Not yet," I said. She leaned in. "What Vanessa did, how she handled your money, that isn't right. Even if you gave it willingly." I hesitated. "You still have those photos, right?" "The bank records." I pulled out my phone and opened the gallery. The pictures were there, blurry but readable. Names, dates, account numbers, transfers. Edith looked through them slowly. "This might be enough," she said. "Enough for what?" "To talk to someone." I thought for a long moment. There was someone I used to know, Walter Hagen's manager at First National Bank. He used to come through my line at the store every Thursday. Always wore a navy blazer. Always had exact change. I might know someone, I said. Edith didn't waste time. That afternoon, she looked up the bank's number and handed me the phone. "Just ask," she said. "See what he says." I dialed. Walter answered on the second ring. "This is Walter. Walter, it's Marion Thorpe. From Freshmart." He paused. Then his voice warmed. "Marion." "My goodness. How are you?" I explained. "Not every detail, but enough." He listened quietly. "If you can send those images to me," he said, "I'll take a look." See if it's something we should be concerned about. Edith helped me upload them from her computer. We clicked send and waited. 3 days passed. Then Walter called. "Marion," he said, "we need to meet." "What I found? It's serious." I looked at Edith. She set down her tea. "I'll drive," she said. The coffee shop Walter chose was on the corner of Main and Carson, not far from the library. It had wide windows and polished booths and the kind of soft music you barely noticed. Edith parked out front and walked in beside me, hand resting lightly on my elbow. Walter was already at a table near the back, a folder by his coffee cup. He stood as we approached and shook my hand gently. "You look well," he said, nodding toward the chair across from him. "Better," I said, taking a seat, thanks to her. Edith smiled and settled in quietly beside me. Walter opened the folder without preamble. "I've looked over everything. I also pulled a few records directly from the bank's internal system. I hope you don't mind." "Not at all," I said. He turned one page after another as he spoke. "Your daughter-in-law has 5 accounts in her name, 4 personal one that appears to be a dummy business account. All of them have regular deposits, some monthly, some bi-weekly. They line up almost exactly with your pension contributions and a few other incoming funds. That alone wouldn't raise alarms, except for this." He slid a paper across the table. It had Garrett's name at the top and a number near the bottom that made my breath catch. 120,000, I read quietly. Walter nodded. "A loan taken out in Garrett's name last year, secured against the house. The money was transferred to one of Vanessa's accounts 2 days later." I looked at Edith. She didn't say anything, but her eyes were sharp. "He never mentioned a loan," I said. "That's what concerns me," Walter said. "The signature on this document doesn't match the others on file. Not closely. I've flagged it with our legal department. They're reviewing it now, but off the record, it doesn't look like his handwriting." "Could she have forged it?" I asked, the word heavier than I expected. "It's possible," he said. "And it's also illegal." "Very." He turned another page. "The house is behind on payments. 3 months. If things don't get caught up quickly, foreclosure proceedings will begin. In fact, the initial notice is already in the system." I sat back. "Garrett doesn't know." Walter shook his head. "If he does, he hasn't contacted the bank. And the money I asked. The loan money gone," he said. "Withdrawn in chunks, mostly cash. There's no sign of an investment or purchase. Just transfers and ATM withdrawals." We left the coffee shop just after noon. The wind had picked up and Edith buttoned her coat as we stepped onto the sidewalk. "He needs to know," I said. She nodded. "Yes, he does." Back at her house, I sat at the kitchen table and called him. It went to voicemail. I sent a text, then another the next day. Nothing. On the 3rd day, I asked Edith to drive me to the house. "I won't go in," I told her. "I just want to wait outside." We parked across the street near the hedges that lined the neighbor's yard. The house looked the same as it always had, paint a little faded porch light still burned out. It was just past 6 when Garrett's truck pulled into the driveway. I stepped out and walked across the street. He was halfway to the door when he saw me. He stopped, one hand on his keys. "Garrett," I said. "Please." He didn't move, didn't smile, but he didn't go inside either. "I need to show you something." He hesitated, then sighed and walked toward me. I pulled the file from my bag and handed it over. He flipped through the pages without saying a word. I watched his face shift confusion, then disbelief, then something darker. "I didn't sign this," he said, tapping one page. "I know. This isn't my signature. I know." He looked up, his eyes narrow. "What are you saying?" That Vanessa did this? I'm saying you should ask her. Right then, the front door opened. Vanessa stepped out, arms crossed. What's going on? Garrett didn't answer her, just held up the papers. Did you take out a loan, he asked. She blinked. What? In my name. Against the house. She walked down the steps slowly. What are you talking about? This loan, $120,000. These are from the bank. Her eyes flicked to the papers. Where did you get that? He didn't answer. She tried to smile. Honey, you're tired. These are probably old documents. You signed a power of attorney before that long trip last year. Remember, I just used it for an opportunity. A real estate thing. It was supposed to be a surprise. Garrett looked at her, then back at the file. I was going to tell you, she added. He shook his head. Where's the money now? She didn't speak. Vanessa. It's tied up, she said quickly. Investment accounts. It's not liquid yet. Then why are we behind on the mortgage? She paused. There were some setbacks. He looked at me, then back at her. You forged my name, he said. I had a legal right, she said. You signed the papers. I didn't sign that loan. She stepped closer to him. Don't do this, she said. Not in front of her. Garrett didn't move. I'm calling the bank. Her face changed then, just slightly, a twitch at the corner of her mouth. She turned to me. You just couldn't leave it alone, she said. You had to ruin everything. I didn't answer. She turned back to Garrett. Are you really going to believe her after everything you know how she gets? He didn't say a word, just walked past her and into the house. The door stayed open behind him. Vanessa followed, slamming it behind her. I stood on the sidewalk for a few seconds, not sure what to do. Then I walked back across the street. Edith was waiting with the passenger door open. Did he believe you? She asked. I don't know. She nodded and started the engine. The call came 2 days later, just as Edith and I were setting the table for dinner. Garrett's name lit up the screen. I wiped my hands on a towel and answered on the third ring. He didn't say much, just asked if I could meet him alone at the diner off Route 8, the one with the green booths and the old jukebox that hadn't worked since 1994. I told him I'd be there in 20 minutes. He was already seated when I walked in, a cup of black coffee in front of him and the folder I'd given him resting unopened beside it. His shoulders were slouched, and he looked like he hadn't slept. I slid into the booth across from him. He stared at his hands. You were right, he said. I didn't speak. I went to the bank yesterday, talked to Walter. Got a copy of the loan documents, the video footage from the branch. She went alone, said I'd authorized everything. I waited. She used a power of attorney form, one I don't even remember signing, but Walter says it looks like the real thing. It might be, I said quietly. But that doesn't mean she had your permission to do this with it. He nodded slowly. She said it was for a business, a boutique she wanted to open. Said it was going to be hers, something separate from me. But there's no boutique, just debt. And that house? It's not even ours anymore, Mom. Not really. We're 3 weeks from default. I folded my hands in my lap. You can fix it. He looked up. How? Start by freezing the accounts. All of them. Talk to a lawyer. Go to the police if you have to. Walter said the bank's legal team is already reviewing it. Garrett rubbed his temples. She says if I report her, she'll tell people I hit her, that I pushed you down the stairs, that you're senile. My chest tightened. She can't prove what isn't true. She doesn't have to, he said. She's loud. She's convincing. And He stopped himself. I let her run everything. The bills, the paperwork. I signed things without reading. I didn't want to deal with it. I reached across the table and touched his hand. That doesn't make you bad. It makes you human. But now you know. He held my gaze. I need help. I gave a small nod. We'll figure it out. That night, Garrett came to Edith's house and brought a duffel bag with some clothes. Vanessa had locked him out, changed the garage code, and left his belongings in the yard. Edith put fresh sheets in the spare room. We ate dinner at the table together, the three of us like we hadn't in years. The next morning, we met with a lawyer, Ms. Doherty, a woman in her 60s, who wore glasses low on her nose and had the patience of someone who'd seen every kind of mess two people can make with money. She took copies of the bank documents and listened carefully. She didn't interrupt, just asked Garrett questions and made notes. When we finished, she closed her folder. You have a solid case, she said. We'll file a fraud report, challenge the loan, and notify the mortgage company immediately. I'll also request an emergency hold on any joint accounts. If she continues withdrawing funds, it could complicate the civil side. What about the criminal side? Garrett asked. That depends, she said. Do you want to press charges? He hesitated. I don't know. You don't have to decide today, she said. But you do need to act quickly if you want to protect what's left. We walked out of the office into a gray, windy afternoon. Garrett held the door open and waited while I stepped through. She'll hate me for this, he said quietly. I looked at him. She already does. That evening, Vanessa called. Garrett let it ring twice, then answered. I sat beside him on the couch, not speaking, just listening. Her voice was sharp, even from across the room. I could hear the pacing in her words. You think you're so clever? She snapped. Dragging your mother into this, calling the bank freezing accounts. Do you know what you've done? Garrett didn't raise his voice. I did what I had to. You're nothing without me. You can't even pay a bill. I'll figure it out, he said. I'll ruin you, she said. I'll go public. I'll say, you hit me. I'll say your mother's unstable and you covered it up. You think people won't believe me? He didn't answer. She kept going, threat after threat. Then a long pause. You have 3 days, she said. After that, I go to the papers. The line went dead. He lowered the phone jaw tight. She's scared, I said. He nodded. Good. The next morning, we went back to the lawyer's office and gave formal consent to proceed. Ms. Doherty filed the paperwork with the bank and the mortgage company. A temporary freeze was granted. The fraud investigation was officially underway. Garrett started making calls to former clients, to people he'd once worked with. He printed out resumes, opened a new checking account in his name only. Day by day, I watched something return to him. Not confidence exactly, but steadiness. One night after dinner, we sat outside on Edith's porch. The air was cool, and the crickets had started chirping in the grass. Garrett leaned back in his chair, quiet for a long time. I knew something was off, he said finally, for a long time. But I didn't want to face it. I didn't respond. He looked out toward the trees. Thank you for not giving up. I reached over and took his hand. The porch light flickered once, then held steady. It started with a notice on the door. Garrett and I had gone by the house to collect a few more of his things. It was just after 5, the sun low over the rooftops. We parked across the street, same as before, but this time there were 2 envelopes taped to the front door. One white, one yellow. He pulled them down, read the top sheet, then passed it to me without a word. The white envelope was from the mortgage company notice of foreclosure proceedings officially initiated. The yellow one was from a local attorney's office. Vanessa had filed a restraining order citing financial harassment and emotional endangerment. It barred Garrett from entering the property without police escort. The irony sat thick in the air. We didn't go inside. Instead, we drove straight to Ms. Dougherty's office and gave her both envelopes. She nodded once, calm as ever, and added them to Garrett's growing file. Then she opened her desk drawer and pulled out a slim folder labeled Vanessa M. Rusk. "I was waiting to show you this," she said. "We ran a background check." She passed it across the desk. Inside were records from 2 counties in another state. A fraud complaint from 8 years ago later dropped. A civil suit over unpaid rent. Another small claim involving forged checks settled privately. Nothing that rose to a felony, but enough to show a pattern. Garrett stared at the folder for a long time. "She's careful," he said finally. Ms. Dougherty nodded. "Until she isn't." That same week, the bank's legal team completed their handwriting analysis. Walter called to confirm it. Garrett's name had been forged. The loan application had been submitted using a power of attorney, but the actual signature on the loan contract didn't match any official document they had on file. The bank issued a formal fraud complaint, paused the foreclosure, and sent a notice of breach to Vanessa's address. By Friday, Garrett had a new phone plan in his name, a separate bank account, and a temporary protection order filed through Ms. Dougherty's contacts at the courthouse. The house was still in limbo, but the legal tide had shifted. That Sunday, we found Vanessa's public statement online. She had posted a long message on social media, some names removed, some heavily implied. She wrote that she'd endured years of emotional manipulation, that her husband had abandoned her and their shared home, and that certain older relatives had conspired to smear her name for financial gain. The post was shared, commented on, and screenshotted by people in town. But Garrett didn't respond. Neither did I. 2 days later, the sheriff's department confirmed she had removed several pieces of property from the house: 2 flat-screen TVs, 3 sets of furniture boxes of jewelry, and Garrett's tools. She claimed all of it as hers. They let her go pending review. Garrett stayed quiet, kept his focus. He started part-time landscaping work with a friend who ran a small company. Ms. Dougherty helped him file a claim to recover damages for the fraud and loss of personal property. Walter walked him through the paperwork to rebuild his credit. I saw the change slowly. At first he moved like someone expecting a door to slam behind him. But as the days passed, his voice steadied. His shoulders lifted. He sat at the kitchen table each morning with a mug of coffee, reading through contracts and asking questions. He called Edith ma'am without thinking, then apologized with a small smile. It was the first time I'd seen him smile in weeks. One afternoon, I passed by the spare room and saw him sitting at the desk, flipping through an old photo album I hadn't seen in years. He didn't say anything when I stepped in, just turned the page to a picture of him and his father in the front yard, Garrett no older than 8, holding a toy hammer. "She used to say I was nothing like him," he said. I stood beside him and looked at the photo. "That's not true," I said. He didn't reply, but his hand rested on the page a little longer before turning it. The following Friday, we got the letter. Official notice from the mortgage company: the foreclosure had been canceled. The fraud claim was approved and the loan declared void. Garrett was cleared of all responsibility for the debt. The property title was being reevaluated pending the outcome of the civil suit. We sat around the table, the letter in the center, Edith reading it twice just to be sure. "You're free," she said, finally, handing it back. Garrett exhaled. That night, he made dinner. Chicken pot pie from scratch, the way his grandmother used to. He even made the crust himself, muttering over the dough as it stuck to the counter. We ate with the windows open, the evening breeze carrying in the scent of jasmine from the yard. It was quiet, comfortable, like the sound of something being mended slowly, piece by piece. Afterward, he walked outside and sat on the porch steps. I followed a minute later and sat beside him. "I don't know what comes next," he said. "You don't have to know," I said. "You're already on your way." We stayed there for a while, the porch light casting soft halos across the grass. The road ahead wasn't clean, but it was his. The trial was scheduled for early March. The courthouse sat 3 blocks from the river, a red brick building with narrow windows and a clock that never seemed to keep proper time. Garrett wore a navy suit he'd borrowed from a friend, slightly too tight in the shoulders but pressed and clean. We arrived together just after 7, even though proceedings didn't start until 9. Edith packed a thermos of coffee and 2 breakfast rolls wrapped in wax paper. Vanessa was already there. She stood by the courthouse steps with her attorney dressed in a pale gray coat and dark sunglasses, even though the sun hadn't come up fully yet. Her hair was done, lips painted, heels clicking sharply on the pavement. She didn't look at us. Inside the courtroom was quiet. No gallery, just a few observers, court officers, and the judge's clerk, typing behind a desk. Ms. Doherty took her seat beside Garrett, flipping open a binder the size of a phone book. The judge entered right on time, and things began. It wasn't loud or theatrical like on television. There were no raised voices, no dramatic outbursts, just steady questioning. The judge reviewed the mortgage documents first, then the forged power of attorney, the signature comparisons, the financial transfers. Ms. Doherty presented every record with quiet precision. Garrett didn't speak unless asked. When he did, his voice was calm. Vanessa's lawyer objected to several documents. The judge allowed some, dismissed others. Midway through, a new detail emerged: a second loan in Vanessa's name, one Garrett hadn't known about. Smaller, but tied to the same house. Ms. Doherty requested an immediate record pull. Within 15 minutes, it was confirmed the loan had been bundled with the original mortgage but routed to a separate bank account, an account registered under Vanessa's maiden name, opened 6 weeks before she filed for separation. The courtroom shifted slightly. The judge adjusted his glasses and scribbled something onto a notepad. He didn't comment right away, just asked for the closing statements. Vanessa didn't speak at all. Not once. Her attorney gave a brief statement about misunderstanding, emotional strain, lack of malicious intent. Then Ms. Doherty stood, holding one photograph in her hand, an image of Garrett and Vanessa from their first year of marriage, standing in front of the house with a sold sign between them. She said nothing about love, loss, betrayal, or intent. Just facts, names, dates, lines drawn between events. The judge requested a recess. We waited in the hallway just outside the courtroom, the vending machine humming behind us. Garrett leaned against the wall, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on a scuff mark near the floor. Vanessa sat across the hall with her attorney, flipping through her phone. Her leg bounced up and down, but her expression never changed. 20 minutes later, the clerk called us back in. The ruling came quickly. The judge found that fraud had occurred. Garrett was declared sole owner of the home. The forged documents were voided. Vanessa was ordered to vacate any claim to the property and repay a portion of the funds, amount to be determined in a separate hearing. The restraining order was dropped. The civil suit was closed. No one clapped, no one cried. It was quiet like the slow closing of a door. Outside, Garrett stood on the courthouse steps for a long time. The wind had picked up. His tie fluttered slightly against his chest. He didn't say anything, just looked down at the parking lot, his face unreadable. Then he turned to me. "Let's go home," he said, and for the first time, I knew which home he meant. That evening, we stopped by the house. He unlocked the front door with the new keys Ms. Doherty had handed him and stepped inside for the first time in months. The place smelled stale, like dust and boxed up air, but it was still his. The walls, the floors, the small dent near the baseboard where he'd dropped the toolbox years ago. He walked through every room, slowly touching door frames, testing light switches, opening cabinets. The guest room had been cleared out. The master bedroom, too. Just a few hangers left in the closet. On the kitchen counter sat a small envelope addressed to Garrett. Inside was a receipt for the moving truck and a short note in neat handwriting. "Take care. V." He folded it once, then dropped it in the trash. That night, we didn't stay long. Just enough to walk the perimeter, flip the breakers, open a few windows. We'd come back tomorrow with cleaning supplies. But before we left, he stopped at the front steps, knelt down, and lifted the corner of the doormat. Taped underneath was a small key ring with 2 keys, 1 brass, 1 silver, and a tiny tag that read garage. Neither of us had placed it there. Vanessa must have left it. He pocketed the keys and closed the door behind him. The sound of it latching echoed through the quiet house. When we got back to Edith's, Garrett didn't go straight to bed. He stayed up late in the living room, the lamp beside him casting a warm halo over his shoulders. He sat with a notebook open, sketching a floor plan. Not a new house, not a remodel, just small changes. A new coat of paint, a different rug, maybe a vegetable garden in the back. He didn't talk much, but his hand moved steadily across the page. The next morning, we drove to the hardware store. We had a long list. We spent the next 2 weeks scrubbing every surface of that house. Garrett power washed the driveway, patched up drywall, sanded, and stained the porch railings. I repainted the living room a warm almond color and replaced the curtains with soft blue linen. Edith brought over her lemon oil for the wood floors and a basket of herbs to plant near the kitchen window. Every day we reclaimed another piece of the space, not just physically, but emotionally. There were no big declarations, no grand unveiling, just quiet progress. The house began to feel like home again. Garrett found his father's old toolbox in the attic, tucked behind a stack of dusty moving blankets. Inside was a folded photograph of him as a boy, maybe 6 or 7, standing in front of the garage, holding a model airplane. The edges were worn soft, but the smile on his face was still clear. He left it on the mantel next to a small vase of tulips I brought in from the market. It felt right there, like it had always belonged. Vanessa didn't come back. She didn't contest the judge's order or call to explain herself. One envelope arrived from her lawyer, forwarding the final paperwork. No note, no apology, just signatures and legalese. Garrett signed and mailed it back the same afternoon. Then he walked to the curb and took down the nameplate she'd nailed into the mailbox years ago. He didn't replace it. Not yet. We took our time filling the rooms again. A new coffee table from the second-hand store. A bookshelf made of reclaimed pine. A small ceramic lamp shaped like a lighthouse that Edith said reminded her of Maine. Garrett cooked his first dinner in the kitchen on a Tuesday, pan-fried catfish with collard greens and cornbread. We ate on the back porch with a citronella candle burning low and the evening breeze rustling through the screen door. Later that night, Garrett stood in the doorway of the spare bedroom, arms crossed. "I think I want to turn this into a reading room," he said. He didn't say why. He didn't have to. The room had always been meant for something else, a nursery, a possibility, a conversation that never happened. But standing there, in the quiet, surrounded by clean walls and fresh air, it became something new, something hopeful. We never talked much about the trial after that, or the years before it. Some things didn't need to be picked apart once they were over. What mattered was that Garrett had come through it weathered, yes, but still standing. Still kind. Still his mother's son. The Sunday before Easter, we hosted lunch for Edith and a few neighbors. Nothing fancy, ham potato salad, lemon squares. After everyone left, Garrett and I sat on the steps with our coffee and watched the neighborhood kids ride their bikes up and down the block. The sky was soft and blue like a painting with no frame. He reached over and took my hand. "I didn't think I'd make it back here," he said quietly. But I did. And that was the thing. Coming back didn't always mean going backward. Sometimes it meant returning to a place with new eyes, choosing what to carry and what to leave behind. If you've ever had to rebuild from the ground up, brick by brick, memory by memory, you'll understand. Sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet and steady and shaped like a front porch, bathed in afternoon light. Thanks for listening to our story. If any part of it reminded you of your own, I'd love to hear from you. Take care of yourself. And if you feel like it, go ahead and subscribe or share this with someone who might need it.